Kethevora had never felt fear in her entire life, and she believed this made her perfect. She stood in the briefing room of the Coalition command station called Meridian's Rest, her scales gleaming under the cold lights as she read her new assignment for the third time. The words had not changed, but she kept hoping they would. She was being sent to fight alongside humans. The Silithians were an ancient and proud warrior race. For 3,000 years, her people had worked to remove fear from their blood. Generation after generation, they had bred the weakness out of themselves until no Silithian alive could feel terror or panic or dread. They considered this their greatest achievement. A warrior without fear was a warrior without weakness, or so the High Council always said. Kethevora had earned 4 medals of honor across 4 brutal campaigns. She had faced the razor beasts of Tellan Prime without flinching. She had walked through fire on the burning moons of Kestrath. She had done all of this with a calm and steady heart because fear was something she simply could not experience. But now she would fight beside humans, and something about this assignment troubled her in ways she could not name. The humans were a young species. They had only joined the Galactic Coalition 50 years ago, and most older races still viewed them as primitive newcomers. They were soft and small and fragile. They needed to sleep for 8 hours every single day. They ate constantly and complained about temperature changes and caught diseases from the smallest things. By every measure, they should have been weak. And yet the reports said otherwise. The reports spoke of human soldiers doing impossible things. The reports described humans fighting through injuries that should have killed them, charging into battles they could not win, sacrificing themselves for comrades they had known for only weeks. The High Council dismissed these stories as exaggeration, but Kethevora had read too many of them to ignore. She gathered her gear and made her way to the docking bay where the assault frigate Pale Morning waited. The ship would carry her team to Verath 4, a colony world that had fallen to the Hollow 3 months ago. The Hollow were a hive mind species that existed only to consume. They ate everything: plants, animals, people. 2 million colonists had lived on Verath 4 before the invasion. Coalition intelligence believed that fewer than 10,000 might still be alive, hiding in bunkers and ruins, waiting for rescue that might never come. Kethevora boarded the ship and found her new squad in the common area. There were 3 humans. Sergeant Chen was their leader, a man of medium height with black hair and dark eyes that seemed older than his face. Corporal Okonkwo was a tall woman with rich brown skin and a laugh that filled the room. Private First Class Reyes was the youngest, barely an adult by human standards, with nervous hands that never stopped moving. They looked up when Kethevora entered, and she saw curiosity in their expressions rather than hostility. This surprised her. Most species found the Silithians intimidating, with their scaled skin and sharp teeth and towering height. But these humans simply nodded and made room for her at their table. "You must be our new heavy weapons specialist," Sergeant Chen said, and his voice was calm and warm. "Welcome to the team." "I am Kethevora of the 7th Silithian Legion," she replied, keeping her tone formal. "I have been assigned to your unit for this mission." "Great," Corporal Okonkwo said with a grin. "We could use someone who can carry the big guns. You ever fight the Hollow before?" "Twice," Kethevora answered. "They are dangerous but predictable. They swarm and overwhelm. The key is to never let them surround you." "Good advice," Private Reyes muttered, and Kethevora noticed that his hands were shaking slightly. Was he cold? The temperature seemed acceptable. She watched the humans as they prepared for the mission. They checked their weapons with practiced efficiency, but they also did strange things. They shared food from their personal supplies, passing containers back and forth, and commenting on the taste. They showed each other small photographs of people and places. They talked about things that had nothing to do with combat, sports and music and restaurants they wanted to visit when the war was over. Kethevora found this behavior confusing. A Silithian squad would spend this time in meditation and tactical review. These humans seemed almost casual about the death that awaited them on the surface below. But then she noticed something else. Beneath the laughter and the easy conversation, there was a tension in their bodies. Their eyes kept moving to the viewport where Vareth 4 hung like a wounded jewel. Their smiles would flicker and fade before returning. They were not casual at all, she realized. They were afraid. This should have reassured her. Fear was weakness after all, and weakness could be exploited. But instead, Cathavora felt that strange unease growing in her chest. These humans knew they might die tomorrow. They felt the terror of that possibility in every cell of their fragile bodies. And yet here they sat, sharing meals and memories as if the fear meant nothing. How could they function like this? How could they laugh when death was so close? Sergeant Chen caught her staring and offered a small smile. First time fighting alongside humans? Yes, Cathavora admitted. His expression shifted to something she could not read. Was it sadness? Amusement? Warning? She could not tell. Just stay close, he said quietly. And whatever happens down there, do not mistake what we do for madness. Before she could ask what he meant, the ship's alarm sounded. They were beginning their approach to Vareth 4. The mission was starting. Cathavora checked her weapons and armor one final time. She was ready for battle. She was a Silithian warrior, genetically perfected, incapable of fear. Whatever waited on that dying world below, she would face it with a calm and steady heart. But as she watched the humans rise from the table, still joking, still afraid, still somehow ready to fight, she felt something flicker in the depths of her ancient and carefully engineered mind. It was not fear, because fear was impossible for her. It was something else. It was curiosity mixed with confusion, mixed with the tiniest seed of doubt. What did these strange and fragile creatures know that her people had forgotten? She pushed the question aside and followed her new squad toward the drop pods. The surface of Vareth 4 waited below, crawling with monsters. Soon she would have her answer, whether she wanted it or not. The drop went wrong the moment they hit the atmosphere. Cathavora felt the pods shudder as anti-air fire tore through the sky around them. Warning lights flashed red and orange. The pilot screamed coordinates into his communicator, but static swallowed his words. Through the tiny viewport, she could see other pods spinning off course, trailing smoke and fire as they scattered across the horizon. Her pod slammed into the ground with enough force to crack her teeth together. The impact harness saved her life, but her entire body ached as she kicked open the emergency hatch and rolled into the scorched dirt of Vareth 4. The air tasted like ash and copper. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, purple and sick yellow, choked with smoke from fires that had been burning for months. In the distance, she could see the shattered remains of what had once been a city. Now it was just bones and rubble, a graveyard for 2 million souls. "Cathavora!" a voice called out, and she turned to see Sergeant Chen stumbling toward her. His face was cut and bleeding, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Behind him came Corporal Okonkwo, limping but alive. "Where are the others?" Cathavora demanded. "Scattered," Chen said grimly. "Our communications are down. Enemy fire hit the relay station before we even launched. We are on our own." Okonkwo checked her rifle and spat blood onto the ground. "So we walk. Rally point is 40 kilometers northeast. If anyone survived, that is where they will go. 40 kilometers through hollow territory." Cathavora ran the calculations in her mind. Their survival probability had dropped below acceptable parameters. Any Silithian commander would order a tactical retreat to the extraction zone. Any Silithian warrior would prioritize survival over mission objectives, but she was not with Silithians anymore. Chen was already moving, his weapon raised, his eyes scanning the ruins ahead. Okonkwo fell in beside him, covering his blind spots as if they had done this 1,000 times before. They did not discuss retreat. They did not calculate odds. They simply started walking toward the danger. Kethvora followed, her heavy plasma cannon humming with charged energy. She watched the humans move and noticed something strange. Their steps were quick but quiet. Their breathing was controlled but faster than normal. Their fingers rested on their triggers with a tension that spoke of readiness. They were afraid. She could see it in every line of their bodies. And yet they kept moving forward. The first holo patrol found them 2 hours later. 12 of the creatures emerged from a collapsed building, their black chitin gleaming wet in the dim light. They stood on 6 legs and had no eyes, only rows of teeth that stretched across their entire heads. They made a clicking sound as they communicated with each other, and then they charged. Kethvora planted her feet and opened fire. Her plasma cannon tore through 3 of them in a single blast, and she felt the familiar calm of combat settle over her. This was what she was made for. This was where she belonged. But then she heard something that made her pause. Okonkwo was screaming, not a scream of fear or panic, a scream of rage. One of the holo had gotten close enough to rake its claw across her shoulder, and blood was pouring down her armor. But instead of falling back, instead of retreating to safety, Okonkwo stepped forward. She jammed her rifle into the creature's mouth and pulled the trigger until it stopped moving. "Okonkwo!" Chen shouted. "You are hit!" "I noticed," she shouted back, and there was something wild in her voice. She was shaking. Tears were streaming down her face, but her hands never stopped moving, never stopped firing, never stopped killing. Kethvora had seen Silithian warriors fight through injuries before. They did it with cold precision, ignoring the damage to their bodies through sheer mental discipline. But this was different. Okonkwo was not ignoring her pain. She was feeling every bit of it, and she was using it as fuel. The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. 12 holo lay dead in the dirt, and the 3 soldiers stood among the corpses, breathing hard. "Let me see that wound," Chen said, reaching for Okonkwo's shoulder. "It is fine," she insisted, but she let him examine it anyway. The cut was deep, and the blood would not stop flowing. Chen pulled out a medical kit and started working on her with hands that knew exactly what to do. Kethvora watched them and felt that strange unease growing stronger. "How did you continue fighting?" she asked Okonkwo. "You were injured. You were in pain. How did you not stop?" Okonkwo laughed, and the sound was harsh and broken. "Stop? Why would I stop?" "Because you were afraid," Kethvora said. "I could see it. You were terrified." "Of course I was terrified." Okonkwo stared at her with wide eyes. "I thought I was going to die. I thought that thing was going to tear my throat out. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe." "Then how did you keep fighting?" Okonkwo looked at her for a long moment, and something like pity crossed her face. "The fear does not make me weak," she said slowly, as if explaining something simple to a child. "The fear tells me I have something to lose. It tells me I want to live. And that wanting, that desperate need to survive, makes me fight harder than any calm ever could." Chen finished bandaging the wound and stood up. His expression was grim as he looked at the road ahead. "We need to keep moving. More will come." They walked in silence for a while, and Kethvora found herself unable to stop thinking about what Okonkwo had said. Fear as motivation. Fear as strength. It went against everything her people believed. They reached the outskirts of the destroyed city as the sun began to set. The streets were littered with debris and worse, the remains of people who had tried to flee, colonists who had almost made it to safety. Chen stopped beside the wreckage of a transport vehicle. Something small and colorful lay in the dirt nearby. He bent down and picked it up, and Kethvora saw that it was a toy, a stuffed animal of some kind, meant for a child. Chen held it in his hands and went very still. Okonkwo put her hand on his shoulder but said nothing. There was nothing to say. They all knew what this meant. A child had died here, along with so many others. When Chen looked up, Kethavora saw something in his eyes that made her take a step backward. It was not fear. It was something older and darker and infinitely more dangerous. It was the look of a creature that had decided something and would not be stopped. "Let us find the others," he said, and his voice was quiet and cold. "And then let us make these things pay for what they have done." For the first time in her genetically perfect life, Kethavora felt something she could not name. It crawled up her spine and settled in her chest like a cold weight. She was not afraid. She could not be afraid. But as she looked into the eyes of this small, fragile, terrified human, she understood that she was standing next to something far more dangerous than any monster. She was standing next to a human with nothing left to lose. The ruins of the capital city offered no comfort and no safety. Kethavora crouched in the darkness of a collapsed school building, listening to the clicking sounds of hollow patrols moving through the streets outside. They had been trapped here for 6 hours, unable to move forward, unable to go back. The monsters were everywhere, hunting for any survivors they might have missed. Chen sat against the far wall, his eyes closed, but his body tense. The toy he had found was tucked into his belt. Okonkwo lay beside him, her wound freshly bandaged again, her breathing shallow from blood loss and exhaustion. They needed rest, but rest felt impossible in this place of death. "Tell me something," Kethavora said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. "Tell me about your people." Chen opened his eyes and looked at her. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," she said, and she meant it. "I have studied human biology and history. I know the facts, but I do not understand you. My people removed fear from our blood 3,000 years ago, and we thought this made us strong. But you humans are different. You feel fear constantly, and yet you do things that should be impossible. How is this so?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the clicking sounds grew louder and then faded as the patrol moved on. "Do you know why we removed fear?" Kethavora continued. "The old texts say that fear made us weak. Fear made our ancestors hesitate in battle. Fear made them run when they should have fought. So the High Council decided to eliminate it. They bred the weakness out of our species until no Silithian could feel terror ever again. We thought we had become perfect warriors." "And what happened?" Okonkwo asked, her voice rough with pain. Kethavora paused. She had never spoken these thoughts aloud before. "We became calm," she admitted. "We became efficient. We became very good at following orders and completing missions. But we also became something else, something I never noticed until I fought beside you." "What?" Chen asked. "Empty," Kethavora said, and the word hung in the air like smoke. "We fight without passion, we die without protest. We do not sacrifice ourselves for each other because sacrifice requires caring more about another person than you care about yourself. And caring that much requires fear, the fear of losing them." Chen nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. "Fear is not what you think it is," he said. "Your people saw fear as an obstacle to be removed. But fear is not an obstacle. Fear is information. Fear tells you what matters. I do not understand." "When I am afraid of dying," Chen explained, "it means I want to live. When I am afraid of losing Okonkwo or Reyes, it means I love them. The fear is not the problem. The fear is my heart telling me what is important." Okonkwo pushed herself up into a sitting position, wincing at the pain in her shoulder. "Every human who has ever lived has been afraid," she said. "We are afraid of the dark when we are children. We are afraid of failure when we are young. We are afraid of death when we are old. Fear follows us through every day of our lives like a shadow." "Then how do you function?" Kethavora demanded. "How do you do anything at all?" "We learned," Okonkwo said simply. "Millions of years ago, our ancestors were small and weak. They lived in a world full of predators that wanted to eat them. They should have died. They should have been wiped out before they ever became intelligent. But they survived because they learned to do something incredible. What? They learned to be afraid and act anyway. Okonkwo's eyes shone in the darkness. They learned that the fear was not their enemy. The fear was their ally. It told them when danger was near. It gave them the energy to run or fight. It reminded them that their lives had value, that their children had value, that their tribe had value. Fear made them care, and caring made them strong. Kethvora felt something shifting inside her mind. These ideas were so different from everything she had been taught. Your people eliminated fear and thought you eliminated weakness, Chen said. But fear was never weakness. Fear was the fire that forged courage. Without it, you cannot be brave. You can only be calm, and calm is not enough when everything you love is on the line. A hollow scream echoed through the streets, closer than before. All three of them reached for their weapons. Let me tell you a story, Chen said, keeping his voice low. When my grandfather was young, there was a fire in his building. He was afraid. He was so afraid that his hands were shaking and his legs could barely hold him up. But his neighbor was trapped inside with her children. So my grandfather went into that burning building. He was terrified the entire time. He thought he was going to die with every step. But he carried those children out one by one because his fear of losing them was greater than his fear of the flames. He was a hero, Kethvora said. He was human, Chen corrected her. We are all capable of that. Every single one of us carries the ability to be terrified and still do what must be done. Not because we lack fear, but because we feel it so deeply that we will fight through anything to protect what we love. A massive explosion shook the building, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The Hollow had found them. Chen grabbed his rifle and moved toward the door. Okonkwo followed, blood seeping through her bandages. They were both shaking. They were both afraid, but they did not hesitate. "Kethvora!" Chen shouted. "Stay behind us!" She watched him throw open the door and face the nightmare waiting outside. A Hollow lunged at him, all teeth and claws, and Chen met it without flinching. But she could see the terror in his eyes. She could see his hands trembling even as he pulled the trigger. And in that moment, something broke inside her. The Silithians had removed fear, and they thought they had become strong. But they had been wrong. They had become hollow themselves, empty soldiers going through the motions of combat without ever understanding why it mattered. They had lost the thing that made warriors truly unstoppable, the desperate, burning need to protect something precious. Chen killed the Hollow and immediately turned to check on Okonkwo. Another creature burst through the wall, and Chen threw himself in front of her without thinking. The impact sent him flying across the room, and Kethvora heard his ribs crack. But he was already getting up, already raising his weapon, already putting himself between the monster and his friend. "Why?" she shouted at him. "Why do you keep doing that?" He looked at her with blood running down his face and fear burning in his eyes. "Because she is my friend," he said, as if that explained everything. And suddenly, terribly, it did. Kethvora raised her plasma cannon and charged. For the first time in 3,000 years of Silithian evolution, something ancient and forgotten stirred in her blood. It was fear, true fear. Fear of losing these strange creatures who had taught her what her people had thrown away. She did not know if she could feel the emotion fully. The genetic changes went too deep for that. But she could feel its shadow, its echo, and that was enough. She was afraid, and that fear made her fight harder than she ever had in her entire perfect and empty life. The message came through on a broken radio they found in the ruins of a military outpost. "All coalition forces." The voice crackled through static. "The Hollow Queen has been located. She has nested in the central government building of the capital. Command is authorizing all ground units to engage. If the Queen is not destroyed within 48 hours, Vareth IV will be designated a lost cause. Orbital bombardment will follow. All surviving civilians will be considered acceptable losses. This is not a request. This is our only chance. The transmission ended, and silence filled the small room where Keth Vora and the humans had taken shelter. Reyes had found them 6 hours ago, stumbling out of the darkness with wild eyes and a nearly empty rifle. She had been alone since the drop, fighting her way through hollow patrols with nothing but her weapon and her will to survive. When she saw Chen and Okonkwo, she had collapsed into their arms and wept with relief. Now the 4 of them stood around the damaged radio, processing what they had just heard. "The Queen," Okonkwo said quietly. "We have to kill the Queen." "The central government building is 3 kilometers east," Chen said, pulling up a map on his cracked tactical display. "It will be heavily defended. The Queen never travels without her personal guard. Hundreds of elite hollow, maybe thousands." "No extraction is coming," Reyes added, her voice small and frightened. "The fleet is still fighting in orbit. Ground forces are scattered across the continent. We are alone." Keth Vora studied the map and felt that strange new sensation in her chest, the shadow of fear she had discovered in herself. "The mission parameters have changed," she said. "Our original objective was reconnaissance and survivor rescue. This is something else entirely. This is a suicide mission." Chen looked at her, and his eyes held something she was learning to recognize, the calm that came after accepting the unacceptable. "Yes," he said simply. "It probably is." "Then we should retreat to the extraction zone," Keth Vora argued. "We should wait for reinforcements. There is no logical reason to throw our lives away against impossible odds." "Logic," Okonkwo repeated, and there was no anger in her voice, only a deep and terrible sadness. "You are right. By any logical measure, we should run. We should save ourselves and let someone else deal with the Queen. That would be the smart thing to do." "Then why do I see that you have already decided to go?" Keth Vora asked. Reyes stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, and her face was pale with terror. "Because there are still people alive down there," she said. "Survivors hiding in bunkers, waiting for rescue that will never come if we do not stop this. Children, Keth Vora. There are children in those bunkers. You cannot save them by dying. We cannot save them by running either." Chen walked to the window and looked out at the burning city. "In 48 hours, the fleet will bomb this planet from orbit. Every person still alive will die. The only way to stop that is to kill the Queen and break the hollow hive mind. It is impossible, but it is also the only chance those people have." Keth Vora wanted to argue. Every Silithian instinct told her this was wrong. A warrior did not throw their life away on hopeless battles. A warrior calculated the odds and made rational decisions. But then she looked at the humans. They were all afraid. She could see it clearly now. Reyes was crying softly, tears running down her dirty face. Okonkwo's hands trembled as she checked her rifle. Chen's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscles standing out in his neck. They were terrified of dying. They knew exactly what waited for them in that government building. They understood that they were probably walking to their deaths, and they were going to do it anyway. "I do not understand you," Keth Vora whispered. "I have fought beside many species. I have seen courage and cowardice in equal measure, but I have never seen anything like this. How can you be so afraid and still choose to go?" Chen turned to face her. "Because the fear is not the enemy," he said. "The fear is just my heart reminding me that I have something worth fighting for. Those people in the bunkers are worth fighting for. The chance to save them, even if it costs my life, is worth fighting for. The fear does not make me want to run. The fear makes me want to fight harder." "My people would say that is irrational." "Your people would be right," Chen almost smiled. "It is completely irrational. But humans have never been rational creatures. We are emotional creatures. We feel things too deeply, love too fiercely, hope too stubbornly, and that is why we do things that rational species would never attempt. Okonkwo stood up and grabbed her gear. Enough talking. If we are going to do this, we need to move now. The Queen will not wait for us. They gathered their weapons and supplies. It was not much. 4 rifles, Kethvora's plasma cannon, a handful of grenades, and barely enough ammunition to last an hour of serious fighting. Against a queen and her army, it was nothing. But the humans did not seem to care. They moved through the ruined streets like ghosts, silent and deadly. Kethvora watched them in amazement. Their fear did not slow them down. It seemed to sharpen them, like a blade being honed on a whetstone. Every sense was heightened. Every movement was precise. They were terrified, and that terror made them perfect. They reached the outer perimeter of the government complex as the sun set. The building rose from the center of the city like a mountain of corruption, covered in hollow secretions and pulsing with a sickly bioluminescence. Thousands of creatures crawled over its surface, guarding their queen. "There!" Chen pointed to a service tunnel that led underground. "That is our way in! The Queen will be in the central chamber deep below the building. We fight our way in, plant our explosives, and bring the whole thing down." "And how do we get out?" Reyes asked. Chen looked at her, and his silence was answer enough. Reyes closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were clear and steady. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Let us do this." Kethvora felt the shadow of fear growing stronger in her chest. She was going to die with these humans. She was going to throw her life away on an impossible mission for people she had never met. And somehow, impossibly, that felt right. "I am with you," she said, and the words surprised her as much as anyone. "Whatever happens in there, I am with you until the end." Chen reached out and gripped her arm. "Thank you," he said, and there was warmth in his eyes. "Stay close, watch our backs, and whatever you do, do not stop fighting." They descended into the darkness together. 4 soldiers against an army, armed with nothing but their weapons and their fear. Kethvora understood now why humans were so dangerous. It was not their technology or their numbers or their strength. It was their refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat was certain. It was their stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence on fighting for what they loved, no matter the cost. The Hollow had no idea what was coming for them. The tunnels beneath the government building were alive with nightmares. Kethvora moved through the darkness with her plasma cannon raised, her scales slick with sweat and blood, some of it her own, most of it not. Behind her, the humans fought with a ferocity that defied everything she thought she knew about combat. They had been underground for 2 hours, 2 hours of constant fighting, constant terror, constant death. The Hollow came at them in waves, and each wave was worse than the last. But the humans did not stop. They did not slow down. They did not give up. Reyes fell at the first junction. A Hollow warrior caught her from behind, its claws tearing through her armor like paper. She screamed, a raw, terrible sound that echoed through the tunnels, and turned to face the creature, even as her blood poured onto the floor. She jammed a grenade into its mouth and held it there, held it with all her failing strength until the explosion took them both. "Reyes!" Okonkwo screamed her name, but Chen grabbed her and pulled her forward. "We cannot stop!" he shouted. "Keep moving! Her sacrifice means nothing if we fail!" They pushed deeper into the hive. The walls were covered with organic matter now, pulsing with the heartbeat of the Queen. The air was thick and hot and smelled like rotting meat. Kethvora could hear something massive moving in the darkness ahead, something that made the ground shake with every step. Chen lost his arm at the second junction. A Hollow elite caught him across the shoulder, and the limb came away in a spray of crimson. He did not fall. He did not stop. He switched his rifle to his remaining hand and kept firing, kept killing, kept moving forward with blood pouring from the stump where his arm used to be. "Chen!" Kethvora grabbed him and pressed her hand against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "You need medical attention." "No time." His face was white with shock and pain, but his eyes were still focused, still determined. "We are almost there. I can feel her. The queen is just ahead." Okonkwo took point, and they stumbled through the final tunnel into a chamber that made Kethvora's mind want to break. The queen was enormous. She filled the entire space. A mountain of chitin and teeth and eyes, thousands upon thousands of eyes that turned to look at them as they entered. She was the size of a coalition cruiser, and her body pulsed with the collective consciousness of every hollow on the planet. She opened her mouth, and the sound that emerged was not a scream, but a command, a psychic order that sent every creature in the hive racing toward this chamber. "Plant the charges!" Chen shouted. "We need to bring down the supports!" Okonkwo ran toward the nearest pillar, pulling explosives from her pack. A hollow guard intercepted her, and she killed it without breaking stride. But another was right behind it, and another, and another. They were everywhere, pouring out of the walls like water. Kethvora raised her plasma cannon and fired. The shot struck the queen directly, and for a moment, hope flared in her chest. But the queen barely noticed. The blast left a scar on her massive body, nothing more. She was too large, too powerful, too protected. "Keep shooting!" Chen stumbled toward another pillar, his single arm working to attach a charge. "We do not need to kill her. We just need to bring this place down on top of her." Kethvora felt fear then, real fear, not just a shadow. It flooded through her body like electricity, and for a moment she understood what the humans felt every day of their lives. It was overwhelming. It was paralyzing. It was the most intense sensation she had ever experienced, and it was beautiful. She understood now. Fear was not weakness. Fear was the universe telling her that she was alive, that this moment mattered, that these people mattered. The terror in her heart was not her enemy. It was her soul screaming that she had something to lose. She charged forward with a roar that surprised even her. Her plasma cannon blazed, cutting through hollow after hollow. She did not fight like a Silithian anymore, calm and precise and empty. She fought like a human, desperate and furious and full of love. Okonkwo planted the last charge and turned to run. A hollow caught her leg and pulled her down. Kethvora saw her visor crack as she hit the ground, saw the creature raising its claw for the killing blow. She did not think, she did not calculate. She threw herself across the chamber and put her body between Okonkwo and death. The claw meant for Okonkwo's throat slashed across her back instead, and she screamed as pain exploded through her nervous system. "Kethvora!" Okonkwo grabbed her and pulled her up. "Why did you do that?" "Because you are my friend," Kethvora gasped, and the words felt like the truest thing she had ever said. Chen pressed the detonator. The explosions were not large, but they were precise. The charges brought down the support pillars, and the ceiling began to collapse. Tons of rock and earth fell onto the queen, crushing her, burying her, destroying the heart of the hive. "Run!" Chen shouted. "Everyone run!" They ran. Okonkwo dragged Kethvora, who dragged Chen. Behind them, the chamber caved in, and the queen's death scream echoed through the collapsing tunnels. The hollow all around them went mad, their hive minds shattering as their ruler died. They burst out of the service tunnel and into the light of dawn. The city was chaos, hollow creatures running in circles, attacking each other, dying by the hundreds as the psychic shock of the queen's death rippled through them. "It is over," Okonkwo breathed. "It is actually over." Coalition dropships appeared on the horizon, finally breaking through the orbital battle to reach the surface. Kethvora watched them approach and felt something she had never felt before, relief mixed with joy, mixed with the overwhelming gratitude of survival. They were rescued an hour later. Medical teams swarmed over them, amazed that anyone had survived. The news spread quickly. The queen was dead, The hive was broken, and Varath 4 would be saved. 6 months later, Kethvora stood before the Silithian High Council to deliver her report. The council chamber was vast and cold, filled with her people's greatest warriors and leaders. They listened in silence as she described the battle, the humans, and everything she had learned. "We eliminated our fear and thought ourselves strong," Kethvora said at the end. "We were wrong. Fear was never our weakness. Fear was our strength. It told us what mattered, what was worth fighting for, what was worth dying for. Without fear, we became empty. We became hollow. We became less than what we were meant to be." She looked at the holographic images of Chen, Okonkwo, and Reyes floating beside her. "These humans taught me what fear really is," she continued. "It is not the enemy of courage. It is the fire that forges it. A warrior who cannot feel fear cannot understand sacrifice. A species without terror cannot know love. The humans are not weak because they are afraid. They are strong because they feel fear with every heartbeat and fight anyway." The council dismissed her words as contamination. They called her polluted by inferior species. They removed her medals and stripped her rank. Kethvora did not argue. She simply requested reassignment to the human military divisions. They granted her request, happy to be rid of her. On the day she left, Chen was waiting at the shuttle. His arm had been replaced with a prosthetic, and new scars marked his face. But he smiled when he saw her. "Ready to fight beside humans again?" he asked. Kethvora looked at him, this small, fragile, terrifying creature who had taught her what it meant to be truly alive. "I am afraid," she admitted. Chen's smile widened. "Good," he said. "That means you finally understand." They boarded the shuttle together, and Kethvora felt fear settle into her heart like an old friend. The Silithians could keep their empty calm. She had learned something better. She had learned to be human.